Tucked in Lawai Valley is one of Kauai's most stunning locations, and to many people, perhaps Hawaii's best-kept secret, the National Tropical Botanical Garden, a network of gardens and preserves in Hawaii and Florida. The garden works to save plants from extinction and to protect native and endangered plants from Hawaii and around the Pacific region.
Beautiful.
The garden does scientific research, conservation, and education to perpetuate the survival of plants, ecosystems, and cultural knowledge of tropical regions. That includes sustaining rare and endangered species, some of them in international collections of plants. The staff's work includes maintenance of a database with thousands of entries for every plant collected, grown, and preserved in the garden and restoration projects. The records help to define a botanical garden from a display garden. This is the only tropical botanical garden chartered by Congress which commits the federal government to the garden's mission. Private nonprofits are granted charters only when a compelling case is made to Congress that an organization will serve an important national and public need.
Truthfully, it really is a true statement. We would not be here if it wasn't for the Alaska.
Congressman Neil Abercrombie, a member of the U.S. House Natural Resources Committee, has worked in Congress to help shore up the garden's financial foundation, which is supported by private donations and some federal funds.
It's an honor to have a true public servant, somebody who has given most of his adult life to being an advocate for Hawaii up in Washington, D.C.
The garden is a living laboratory of tropical plants in 5 gardens and preserves. 4 of those areas are in Hawaii, 3 on Kauai, 1 on Maui.
Amazing.
It all started with these springs up on the hillside, and they channeled it into a holding tank, and they distributed and created all these water features that recycle water.
Allerton Garden is one of those areas with water features that lie quietly inside tropical forests, a landscape that follows a river down the valley to one of the most popular breeding grounds for green sea turtles.
Every child in Hawaii who has a love of this land and who intends to make their home for the rest of their days in Hawaii should have the experience of coming here.
This garden, started by Queen Emma in the 1800s, sustains plants selected by the Allerton family for their visual interest. The wealthy Chicago family bought the land in the 1930s and gave the garden a European flair, accented by a love of water sounds. The life of the garden is supported by other vital facilities.
So this is the bottom or the most secure part of this complex.
Workers inside the hurricane-proof Botanical Research Center care for a herbarium, library, and plant collections, which support scientific research and conservation programs.
We're using climate control as a way of controlling pests and pathogens in this building. When we go to the other side here, you'll see a large walk-in freezer, and behind that a plate glass window. That's the area we call the dirty room. So all of these materials, when the collectors bring them back out of the field, they'll be dried out there in a non-clean part of the building. They'll then go through 2 weeks in the freezer. They'll come in here and they'll be mounted on these archival sheets and stored in the herbarium. This cabinet here contains the type specimens. So when our collectors go out wherever they're working in the tropical world and they discover new species of plants, those plants are discovered and brought back as dried herbariums, as dried specimens, mounted on herbarium sheets like this, and these are a permanent record of the biodiversity wherever our collectors go. The type specimens are the original plant that was collected and used to describe that new species. And so these represent really invaluable knowledge, both in terms of the morphological characteristics, what does a plant look like? Does it have hair on its leaves, or what kind of this flower and this and that? But today these specimens become even more important because they represent all of the chemical archives in these plants as well as all of the DNA. So from a medicinal plant research, or today we're using genetics a lot in science and especially in understanding plant relationships, these herbarium sheets become absolutely invaluable. And in many cases, the type specimens here are not represented anywhere else in the world. So as I said earlier, These are really invaluable. If a hurricane was to destroy these, no amount of money in the world could ever replace it. And in many cases, we have plants in here that are now extinct.
The survivability of this building is a key to the survival of its irreplaceable contents. The herbarium has the most extensive recent collection of existing Hawaiian and Marquesan plants, with more than 60,000 specimens.
And unfortunately, this kind of knowledge was lost to Europe.
The library's 44,000 books, prints, and images make up the largest botanical and horticultural collection in Hawaii, dating back to the 16th century. The library includes botanical books, records, and other documents, such as unpublished notebooks of field collectors and correspondence of botanists. The Conservation and Horticulture Center in the McBride Garden propagates more than 10,000 plants a year, many of them rare native plants to Hawaii and the South Pacific. The center and its nursery help the National Tropical Botanical Garden to do its research in botany, horticulture, conservation biology, and restoration ecology. The emphasis in the McBride Garden is collecting wild plant specimens native to Hawaii and other Pacific islands. The result, the world's largest collection of native Hawaiian plants. Scientists believe that 1/3 of the world's tropical plants are threatened by extinction, and Hawaii and the Pacific region are considered hotspots for this danger. About 150 plant species in Hawaii have 50 or fewer individuals alive in the wild.
This is a very rare plant called Lysimachia, which is the only plant in existence in the world of this extremely rare species. Thought to have been extinct for over 60 years. This was discovered by one of our collectors growing on an extremely steep cliff. He was able to collect it, and we've been successful in propagating this one plant. So the only one in the world exists right here.
Then we have a small micropropagation lab. So sometimes we bring material in that we can't, they visited the plant a few times, can't get mature seeds, so they bring in immature seed or propagules of some sort, and we try and produce it in our micropropagation lab.
So most plants go through this triage and wind up going straight to either our seed bank for storage, or else we do germination of the seeds and plant them out right away, or if it's cuttings, before they dry out, they got to go right straight into the mist table and start getting rooted.
One of the projects here involves researchers investigating the recent attack across Hawaii by the tiny, almost microscopic gall wasp, which is killing off the willy-willy. Workers are looking for a way to enlist the natural predator of the wasp to fight back.
The garden has the world's largest collection of plant in the genus called Erythrina. And Hawaii has a native erythrina. It's called the willy-willy, Erythrina sandwichensis. And the willy-willy is on the verge of being driven into extinction because of a gall wasp, an introduced insect from Africa that has just decimated the populations throughout the islands. And in fact, it's destroyed a big percentage of our world collection of Erythrina. But what we're finding is that the gall wasp is a really weak flyer. It can't get into our greenhouse here, so you can see how lush, and we've reduplicated our collection here in our greenhouse. But what we've also discovered is that the gall wasp is not affecting our African species. And so we're now working with the University of Hawaii and other places to help identify potential biological controls, and I think they're about to release something.
That's right. We have a project now with Leila Kaufman, who's doing a baseline study first. She's documenting how much infestation we have. She's working here, she's working at Makawai Cave and in Waimea Canyon, 3 populations. And once they're finished, they're almost ready to release 2 kinds of biocontrol, and then they'll monitor to see, does it catch on, how soon does the infestation go down, is it really effective for a broad scale release or not. So we're being used kind of as a test ground for that, since we have so many erythrinas and they're mostly infested.
Yeah, when you fly into Hana, it's terrible to see whole sections of
just gray.
Gray, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
As if they've been burned.
The Maui population of Erythrina sandwichensis was especially hard hit, and especially on the dry side, not the Hana side, but even the other side.
How did the department let that get started? Weren't they supposed
It was probably an unknown hitchhiker that came in a shipping container. It was certainly not intentionally.
By the time they realized it was almost too late. It actually it exploded in about a year. It was first detected on Oahu, and it was already over here within a year of that time.
I see.
Basically blowing around in the air.
And this was a world collection that we brought together in the 70s for research on cancer. And so, again, it just shows how tenuous things are in the Hawaiian Islands. What makes it such paradise for people, year-round warm climate, beautiful sun, it's also ideal for many pathogens and insects. So
Would the garden be able to claim rights, manufacturing rights, copyright, patent for things you may discover? You mentioned about AIDS research or anything else. Do you get to keep that then?
If it is intellectual property developed by our researchers, the answer is yes.
The alula is another endangered plant the garden is saving. A moth, important to the alula's reproduction, also seems to have disappeared.
So when the pollinator went extinct, these plants began to decline very rapidly. We've filled in with a paintbrush as a stand-in for the moth, but until we can restore the ecosystem, there's no chance that a moth would be able to come back and be the natural pollinator.
But workers have successfully helped the plant to rebound. This is a part of the garden's overall conservation effort to find endangered plants, grow them in a nursery, and reintroduce them into the garden or other locations to rebuild native plant populations.
Our latest survey shows only one individual of this species still remaining out in the wild outside of our care. All the rest of the hundreds and hundreds that exist are really in botanical gardens and restoration sites.
Wow.
So it's a crisis situation.
The alula's improving recovery is still another sign that the National Tropical Botanical Garden's work is making an impact on the environment and future of native plants by discovering new species and saving some from extinction. The success has made the garden and Hawaii a world leader in its field through a number of programs. And one of those programs has even identified a drug that's being tested and could someday be used to protect people from HIV. Congressman Abercrombie's first visit here leaves a strong impression, and the garden's staff gathers to hear his vow to do all he can in Congress to keep the National Tropical Botanical Garden strong.
In my estimation today, I think I understood for the very first time that the life of the land is indeed perpetuated in righteousness. That we have this obligation as human beings to be a part of nature, not to conquer nature, overcome nature, subdue nature, but to take up our role in nature's course that's meant for us. And so I thank you, I give you my deep mahalo, my most profound gratitude to you for your role, whatever it may be, in the preservation and extension of what this land means. It is one of the signal days of my life to be here with you today, and I look forward to coming back and spending lots more time here to renew myself, renew my soul, and renew my commitment to you and to Hawaii. Mahalo.